Let's talk about a crime so audacious, so brilliantly planned, it became the stuff of legend. A story about millions of dollars stolen without a single shot fired. And how this near-perfect crime came crashing down because of one tiny, careless mistake.
So, picture this. It is the dead of night, August 8th, 1963. The Royal Mail train is rumbling through the English countryside on its usual overnight trip from Glasgow to London. For the driver, Jack Mills, everything's normal. Until it isn't. He sees a red signal up ahead at a place called Sears Crossing. Now this is weird, because the mail train never stops there. He hits the brakes, and the whole train grinds to a halt in the pitch-black silence.
Now you have to understand, this wasn't just any old train. One of its carriages was basically a vault on wheels, stuffed with used banknotes getting shipped from Scottish banks back down to London. And on this one specific night, it was carrying an absolutely insane amount of cash. So the big question is, how on earth did a gang of robbers know that this train was basically a rolling bank?
Well, the answer, it all comes down to the plan. This wasn't some clumsy smash and grab. Oh no. This was a criminal masterpiece, and it was built on two incredible pieces of inside information.
The whole operation was run by a guy named Bruce Reynolds, but he had a ghost on his team, a secret informant. People think he was a senior security officer inside the Royal Mail, and this informant, whose real name we still don't know, didn't just give them a tip, he handed them the keys to the kingdom.
Their target was one specific carriage, the high-value packages coach, or the HVP. Now normally this thing was a fortress, but our informant knew a secret that suddenly made the impossible seem very, very possible.
And here they are, the two golden tips. First, the usual high-security coach was out for repairs. The one on the train that night was an old backup, and it had no alarm system. Second, and this was the real jackpot, there had just been a big bank holiday. That meant a huge backlog of cash was being moved all at once. The coach wasn't just full, it was carrying nearly 10 times the normal amount. It was the perfect storm.
So, with that perfect plan in place, the 16-man gang moved into position under the cover of darkness, ready to pull off what would become known as the heist of the century.
Their execution was like clockwork. They just used a glove and a 6-volt battery to turn the green signal red, stopping the train exactly where they wanted it. They cut the phone lines. Then the crew swarmed the engine. Driver Jack Mills tried to fight back, and he was hit over the head with an iron bar. The robbers then uncoupled the HVP coach and drove it about a kilometer down the tracks to a place called Bradygo Bridge, where their getaway truck was hidden.
But this is where the flawless plan hit its first and pretty major snag. See, the gang had their own getaway driver, a guy who used to drive trains. The only problem, he'd never operated this newer model of engine before. He got in the driver's seat and was totally stumped by the controls. So in a moment of sheer panic, they had to drag the semi-conscious, injured Jack Mills back into the cab and force him to drive his own train to their ambush spot. This violence was never part of the plan, and, as we'll see, it had some really tragic consequences. Once they got to the bridge, the crew worked at a frantic pace. They formed a human chain, just passing bag after bag of money down to the truck below. In just a little over 15 minutes, they'd moved 120 mail bags packed with cash. I mean, just try to get your head around that. We're not talking about a suitcase full of money here. We are talking about 2.5 tons of cash. They actually stole so much money that they had to leave 8 bags behind because they just plain ran out of time and space.
So they'd done it. They drove away from that bridge with an absolute fortune and vanished into the night. They were home free, or so they thought. But one of the robbers, in the heat of the moment, had said something that would bring the whole beautiful plan crashing down.
The gang made it safely to their hideout, a remote farmhouse they'd rented about 43 km away. And they were on top of the world. They were celebrating, listening to police radios, dividing up the loot, feeling totally and completely untouchable.
Back on the train, as the last of the robbers was about to leave, he turned to the captured train staff. He wanted to make sure they had a clean getaway, so he gave them a warning. He told them, don't move for 30 minutes.
He probably thought he was being clever, but in reality, he had just handed the police their single biggest clue. Investigators immediately did the math. How far can a truck get in half an hour? That gave them a search area with the radius of about 50 kilometers. And guess what was sitting right in the middle of that circle? Leather Slade Farm.
That one little phrase completely turned up the heat. Now hearing on their police radio that cops were searching all nearby farms, The gang started to panic, and that panic led directly to their most infamous mistake.
The original plan was to lie low at the farm for days, but now they were spooked. They decided to get out of there early. They quickly divided up the cash and paid some local guy a few £1,000s to go in after they left and burn the whole place to the ground, destroying all the evidence. Well, the guy took their money and just never came back. He left the farm completely untouched.
So when police, who were tipped off by a neighbor, finally showed up at the farm, it was an absolute gold mine. They found the empty mailbags. They found the getaway truck with its terrible new paint job. But the real smoking gun, it was almost funny. It was a Monopoly set. You see, to pass the time while they were hiding out, the gang had been playing Monopoly using the real stolen money. And they'd left their fingerprints all over the board.
With fingerprints matching their existing criminal records, the net closed in fast. The aftermath of the crime of the century ended up being a mix of very harsh justice and some real, lasting tragedy.
That Monopoly board basically broke the case wide open. Within weeks, most of the gang had been rounded up. In the end, out of the 16 men involved in the heist, the police managed to track down and arrest 14 of them.
And the courts came down on them hard. Most of the robbers were hit with 30-year prison sentences. The whole country was shocked by the scale of the crime, and it led to a total overhaul of how cash was transported. But the real tragedy here was the driver, Jack Mills. He was so traumatized by the attack that he never worked again, and he died just 7 years later from complications believed to be related to his injury.
And that's pretty much where the story ends. Most of the money was never found, and the gang paid a very steep price, sealing their place in criminal folklore. But even now, after all this time, the most fascinating piece of the entire puzzle is still missing. The identity of that informant, the man they called the Ulsterman, the one who set this whole incredible chain of events in motion. Who was he? Well, that's one secret that seems to have gone to the grave.